Hey Axis and Allies players, the good captain here. Welcome to the final video in this game of Axis and Allies D-Day played against a human opponent. There is a lot that happens in these last two turns that determines the outcome of this game. It's pretty wild. So we're going to go over all of it. Let's start first with what happens on the top or at the top of round 9 for the Allies in terms of their movements. Just a quick recap. The initial assault, the turn 8 assault on Caen by the Germans netted in the loss of 7 of 8 of the German pieces. The odds of losing 7 of 8 to what amounts, statistically speaking, to a coin toss is 3.5%. There is a 3.5% outcome chance of that outcome, and that's what happened to the Germans in Caen. So that is not something that's the fault of the player, in my opinion. What we were shooting for was for ideally 5 or at least 4 pieces to make it in, which is far more realistic. Even to have 3 pieces make it in is only a 14.5% chance. It's far more likely that 5 or at most 4 really was the number we would expect to see. But 5 is definitely a possibility, and that's going to come to haunt us here in a moment. This number here, 5 hits, would have been made the Battle of Caen a coin flip. With just 3 surviving pieces, the Battle of Caen would have been nearly 50-50. But as it was, only 1 piece survived, which was easily destroyed by the British. The second and third order effects of this is that the British now have a very strong and healthy counterattack option to lock up these 2 German armies east of Caen. So in hindsight, one thing that I did not factor into my calculus was that German tanks defend on a 3. This means that it probably would have been statistically wiser to not launch that attack, but to maintain and distribute the tanks between the 3 army groups, knowing that, I think that might be something to explore in the future. Certainly is, distributing 777 across the way like that would have forced these 4 fighters to stay in this spot on turn 10, and as we'll see, that could have been a contributing factor to the eventual outcome. It's difficult to say. At any rate, the dice favored this counterattack and had at least 1 piece survived, which was coulda, shoulda, woulda survived about 75% of the time. This city would have been okay, but the fact that it didn't means this is basically written off now. That is over. There's really almost no way to recover this position just from a positional perspective, having nothing to do with dice. The British now will just move into these zones, lock them up, and this whole side of the map is closed down. Okay? But I like the way I worded it in my previous video. I called it a blended defense. We did this aggressive move on Caen here for reasons that I went over in the previous video, and we did a conservative approach over here in St. Lo for reasons again stated in that previous video. But in short, the Allied position was not as strong over here, so we could take the liberty of spreading out and seeing if the Allies wanted to try to do a wild counterattack or not, or just sit there. As it turns out, they choose to sit there. Okay, so here's what happens. The Allies reinforce the zone that's being fought over here east of St. Lo, and they attack this to lock it up northwest of St. Lo. And the combats are almost irrelevant on the Allied side of the turn, with one key exception. Really, all of this combat is truly irrelevant. We'll go over the dice for completeness at the end of round 9, but it just doesn't matter. There's going to be a couple of areas where dice matter. Otherwise, it's just go, no go. That's it. We're just rating this as thumbs up or thumbs down. So, so long as one side or the other doesn't completely obliterate each other in any of these zones, it's just go, no go. So the battle in G20, this actually goes in favor of the Allies, which is a go, right? So the Germans paltry return fire, no good there. I'm going to skip the Battle of Cherbourg because that's sort of the interesting part of this. This battle in G38, again, just a go, no go. The Allies perform poorly, but it doesn't matter. The Germans perform well, but it doesn't matter because why? At the end of it, there's still Allied pieces here to lock up this German army, and the game is essentially over for this because turn 10, we're not actually influencing where it matters, which is in the city. Okay, battle in G27, which is here east of Caen. Again, just go, no go. Okay, no and no. So both sides just did damage to each other, but otherwise this being locked up in combat at this point, it doesn't matter. Those pieces are mobility killed. This is a threat for turn 10. Or no, it's not even a threat for turn 10. It's all over. So now we go into the... Actually, it is, because you could lock up the Germans with a contested zone there, so I'll pass on that. Now we get to Cherbourg. And Cherbourg, the Allies attack, and this is... The Allies definitely should have caused a bunch of hits here that Cherbourg coulda, shoulda, woulda been written off. Instead, the Allies roll poorly and the Germans roll warm. And despite the catastrophes at Caen and the building, or this breakthrough here northwest of Saint-Lô, it looks really good. Okay, for the Germans in Cherbourg. The Allies failed to... Sorry, that was a bit confusing. There was a second round of combat there. But this is how we look at the end of the Allied side of round 9, okay? This is going to be... Well, there's lots of interesting points, but this is going to be key here. This battle. These 3 artillery have to attack these 5 pieces. So here we see a 21% chance of that happening. Those 5 2 defenders need to get at least 3 hits, and there's a 21% chance of that occurring. All the Germans have to do is survive this attack, and the game is over. And of course, on the German side of the turn, the Allies pick up the so you can see where this is going. 3 hits, that's what they got. That's what they needed. That was the best chance. That was one of the 2 best chances for the Germans to still win this game. So now we've written off Caen, right, because of that 7 out of 8 catastrophe, the air attacks that ruined that front and made all those other pieces over there basically or nearly pointless. We'll get to Caen. There's something like a counterattack on Caen in the final turn. But then Cherbourg goes bottom up, and that's completely out of the game. There's no counterattack option at all. So let's just go back to Caen. Yes, there were still a handful of pieces, 5 pieces. But again, we have the strafing issue. 5 pieces attacking. We really need at least 3 to survive. 2 survive. They don't fare well against these 8 pieces, and so at the end of turn 9, Caen is truly secure and in Allied hands. So 2 out of 3 victory cities go to the Allies by the end of turn 9 with no hope of relighting them for the Germans. So it all comes down to Saint-Lô. And yeah, we do the inevitable counterattack. What do I send in on the Saint-Lô counterattack? All the armor, all 8 armor. So all the armor in the adjacent areas all go into Saint-Lô because turn 10 might matter. So let's do the maximum amount of hits to these core units that we can right now. Maybe we get lucky. The fighters strafe, and of the 8 pieces, right, roughly 50% per unit, only 3 survive. So the Allies essentially roll +1 when using pure luck, not low luck. Low luck would have you say that that's how much they get anyway. But yeah, the Allies roll warm, and there are 3 pieces. And this brings the level of victory for the German player to 47%. With only 3 pieces now, there's only a 47% chance for the Germans to pull the win. But that's still pretty good. And given how lucky the Allies have been so far, surely something will go the way of the Germans. But this does not happen. The best chance to destroy or to end the game for Germany is now over. Okay, the end of round 9, this is how we look. All 3 cities are under Allied control, but they have to control them for a complete game turn. So enter game turn 10, and now it's the Allies' turn. Khan is already frozen. There's just one piece that survives, so these 6 pieces will not even be allowed to try to counterattack in Khan. And this has a repercussion that almost doesn't matter, but the repercussion from that is these 4 fighters are now relieved of duty from protecting Khan from German counterattack. And these 4 American fighters stay over St. Lo. And of course, the correct move is the one that my opponent makes, which is all units attack the Germans and in order to lock them up. Now, the Allies do not have enough units to completely freeze up or to guarantee that they will not be wiped out. So my opponent overloads the hexes, or that he puts in as many pieces as he can and attacks. And it basically ends with contested zones in each of these 3 or 4 really areas around St. Lo. So the Germans cannot move on their side of turn 10, and this concludes in an Allied victory. But even if one of these locations had successfully cleared, they'd still have to run the gauntlet of enemy fighters, both over St. Lo and, this is key, over the zones in which the British fighters now dispersed. So because there was no threat on Khan, there's extra fighters over these 2 areas. Insofar as that is concerned, the AA guns actually did shoot down the parafighters over Rheims, but it didn't matter again because we were locked up in combat. So the bottom line up front is this did end in an Allied victory, but only by the most narrowest of margins. Overall, the dice favored the Germans up into the critical turn, which was turn 8. There was absolutely no change in the rolls as an aggregate on turn 9. It stayed exactly 8.33 in the favor of the Germans, which is a fairly common disparity to see when you're grading things by low luck standards. But this is fairly normal. You're going to see this because so much of the Allied firepower is wrapped up in low hitting dice like 1s and 2s, and low luck does not account for that. So this is fairly normal. What was abnormal were the results in certain key areas, namely in Cherbourg, where they got exactly what they needed here. The 3 hits at the 21% chance, it fell inside that window. The coin flip here, that fell inside the German armored counterattack in St. Lo, fell inside the Allied window there. And of course, the fighters didn't even allow the combat in Khan to competitively occur. So in the end, all of the multiple key battles went the way of the Allies. But like I identified at the outset, there's roughly a 25% chance of that strategy of stacking 4 fighters in Khan and St. Lo working no matter what. 25% happens. It happens 1 in 4 games, and we just saw it. The game is imbalanced and in favor of the Germans. I still say that. In fact, I would use this as proof that it is so. There's some debate, I think, still to be had about the best way to employ fighters. So it could be, I'd say, maybe as high as 30% if you are clever, aggressive, and the dice don't totally tank you as an Allied player. But I'm pretty sure at this point that the game, it favors the Germans. But to speak any more about that is going to be on the main channel. I'll reserve that for a conversation on the main channel. If you followed along this far, thanks for watching this. This was a game of Axis and Allies D-Day, played against a human opponent. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.